Guys, we have got a treat for you today. If you're a data junkie like me and Meyer, this video is for you. We've got the shorty here, Meyer's daily driver. We're gonna do a ton of testing. Meyer, tell us about this truck.
So after I blew up the 5.9 common rail in it, I did build a new, it's a Street 6.7 setup. It's got a Colt Stage 4 cam in it. It's got dual pumps. It's got 200% overs. It's a good basis, but currently it has a bone stock head on it. Yeah. So it also has a PED Aggressor 480. We ran it a little bit. We're going to dyno this setup with the 480 stock head. We're going to measure boost, drive pressure, and EGTs, and then swap the ported head on there, one of our stage 2 ported heads, and do it all again.
Do it all again. We did the same test on a 12 valve a couple years ago with a compound setup.
Yep.
Meyer has always wanted to build this truck, the stock head, so we can get data before and after. Same tune, same turbo, everything. The only difference is a stock head. Rip that guy off, put a ported head back on. It's gonna be awesome.
Yep.
Guys, also, we've got 2 surprises at the end of this video, and they're not lame. They're not like amazing, but they're not lame. So make sure to watch to the end, check out the surprises, and I think with that, we gotta start dynoing this thing so we can rip that head off and do it all again.
$1,031?
Cool. All the runs are close, of course, but I don't know. Let's pull up the graph. Let's look at some data. Let's look at some.
So 1,031, 1702 torque. Those are our numbers.
Okay, so this was our most powerful run. We were all within about 5 to 10 horsepower, but this is the best one that we're going to use for baseline versus a ported head.
Yep.
You mentioned that it hit hard, but it fell fast.
You can see it there for sure. I mean,
look at this torque. I mean, it just.
You peak at like around 1,700, and we're down to darn like, what is that?
1,050.
1,050 by the end. Like, that's a pretty big drop. Like, that's being quite the restriction.
But look at your boost and drive. That's interesting. I mean, this is like amazing. You're like 1-to-1.
It's like staying at 1-to-1, no gates, no nothing. That's really good.
So this turbo's pretty happy as far as like this engine combination feeling. It's like, dude, I got this.
Yeah, I would say. Another thing, I think, okay, this is cool. Like, normally, if you look at dyno graphs, EGTs peak at the very end. Like, if you're pulling a grade, you'll see it. Like, at the end of the grade, that's the hottest you are. Until the grade starts to plateau, the hottest you are is the very end of the run, where everything's heat soaked and everything's going on. What's cool to see here is that it gets hot because it starts getting rich. Well, we've gotten so rich due to the lack of airflow through the stock head. It's peaked and it's on its way down because it's got so little air and so much fuel that the fuel is ultimately quenching the burn. So that is not something you see every day. That's pretty interesting.
This dot here is always at the very end of the run. I mean, it's crazy to see it like almost 500 RPM before the end of the run. It's very interesting.
That is cool.
Overall stock head, I mean, I'm impressed. I mean, we cracked 4 digits with this. That's pretty cool.
Never had a doubt.
Never had a doubt.
Never had a doubt.
Well, now it's time for some fun.
Yep. So, swap heads.
Swap the head. Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get some lunch. All right, guys, we're back. The work is done. Done.
Yep.
New heads on.
Power torque is done. Fluid level's checked. Everything's tight. Like, we're good to go.
Dang! Fire! Dude, come look at this, man.
Oh my gosh.
We got the grass filled up, and this is just horsepower.
That is a gap up there.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? That's gotta be
That's gotta be
darn near 200.
because right here is your 1,100 horsepower. No, sorry, 1,000 horsepower right here.
So that's almost 200. So like,
yeah, 200 horsepower.
Wow.
But even down here, like this is like crazy.
That is
like,
cool.
Usually you have like, I mean, there's no negative. Your head here, your head there.
Like it's
everywhere.
moving, even while it's spooling, it's moving more air. It's not just a higher RPM thing. It's like everywhere.
Dude, this is
That is cool.
huge. So the power difference, 1107 to 1131, you're talking 72 horsepower. No, 76 horsepower peak. But there's a lot of information we're going over. Right now, guys, I'm going to go up in front of a computer screen, get that magic floating head thing that I sometimes do. We're going to go over all the data points, get all the... And there's a lot of information to look at here. I want to go over it all. So
we haven't looked at boost, so you're going to go up there, look at boost, drive. I'm interested.
Let's compare all the stock head versus the ported head. Let's do it now. All right, this is very, very interesting to me. So, again, yellow is your torque curve, green is your horsepower curve. Torque peaks early, then falls. Horsepower carries a lot better. Blue is boost, orange is drive pressure, and red is EGT. Look at the drive and boost on this particular head. It's amazing. The boost is better than 1-to-1, up to about 3,150 RPM. At that point, drive really takes off. A lot more drive pressure than boost. You would guess by graphs the other turbo was happier. You wouldn't realize this is the exact same turbo because the drive is way higher than boost. And we've actually seen this quite a bit when we've done ported head testing. Whenever we do this, the exhaust gets out so much better that the head is no longer the restriction. Now the turbine housing, turbine wheel combination becomes your restriction. All right, let's look at peak numbers for boost and drive. So peak boost on this setup was 49.12 PSI. Peak drive was 455.41. 55.51, excuse me. So a bit of a delta there. Also interesting to me is the EGT curve. It's definitely steeper. We have peak EGT is higher. Peak EGT goes to 1612 degrees, and it never nosed over. If we kept running this, it would have gotten higher and higher. So what that indicates to me, because the other one nosed over, this one didn't, is this one is leaner. When they get fat, they start losing heat. Think sled pullers, all that black smoke going out those awesome hood stacks. That's to keep the EGT cool. Well, this one was running more air, is making more air, so it was leaner the whole way through, and so therefore it never really cooled off. Alright, it's all well and good. Let's compare now. Let's pull them both together so we can look one versus another. The run starts the same. We always try to be very, very careful at our starting points so they're an accurate apples-to-apples run. Alright, Meyer, talk to us about this tune you've created for this kind of testing.
Yeah, so to preface that, back in the old days when we do turbo testing or whatever it was, we would have a process that we used where we let the truck come up to a certain speed, we try to give a certain amount of throttle, we were trying to be super consistent ourselves, and then try to floor the truck at the same time and floor it at the same rate, let off at the same time. There's a lot that would go into it, a lot of human error that could be imposed on the run. Well, now what we've got is since we got our own power-driven tuning now, we're doing this ourselves, and we're making it so that way I can floor it at, in this case, 1500 RPM. I'm flooring it, and the run's not actually starting until 2300. That way it has that 20-30 seconds of like 100 horse to stabilize, get all the temps even, got everything even, and then the tune ramps in the power at whatever RPM that is. Let's say it's 2300 in this case. And that way the tune is controlling all of the ramping and all of the different aspects. So if we see a gain in a little bit of spool, a little bit of power, we know it wasn't because I floored it harder or faster. Maybe, you get the truck a little hotter right before the run. That's going to get the turbo to spool faster. And so you can unknowingly cause different variations like that. Whereas now it's all super consistent. It's great because we can see 10 horsepower on the graph, and we know that's probably 10 horsepower from the whatever parts we changed.
Yeah, it makes it really awesome for consistency, really cool. Run to run, really good apples to apples comparison. Okay, these horsepower curves tell an amazing story. I can't believe this is the same turbo on the same truck. Only difference is the ported head. So first off, we know the peaks. We got a 76 horsepower bump. We already know that from the last screen, but the amazing thing is how well this carries. Look how fast the stock head dives. Just drops off really fast. While this one drops off as well, it's not near as quick. And this difference here between these two lines as we go up in RPM is so noticeable. When you're racing a truck going fast, this would just run away from the stock head, excuse me. It's massive. Look right here. If we go, let's go a big one, this little bump right here. We're talking 1,022 versus 857 horsepower. That's incredible. Is that right? Jeez Louise, that's like amazing. We're talking almost 200 horsepower difference, like 160, 165, something. That's massive. Over 150 horsepower difference between 3,900 and 4,000 RPM, and it just keeps widening and widening as the runs go up. What's also amazing is before peak power, we're making more power everywhere. Even at 2,600 RPM, we're talking a difference of 50 not quite 50, 40 horsepower difference there, at 2,500 RPM. This is one of the few modifications that has no penalty. Everything you do has a trade-off. You want more power, so you put a bigger turbo on. What happens? You sure get that big power up top, but it comes at a penalty down low. You put big injectors on, same story. They kind of flood out down low, harder to tune, big power up top. Every time you make a modification, usually something's a trade-off, this for that. The amazing thing about a ported head is there is no trade-off. Now, you got to understand, a ported head can be a massive trade-off if it's not designed well. If people don't know what they're doing port-wise, flow-wise, there's so much more than you realize at designing a port than just sitting there with a die grinder, hogging away on your bench. People do that. We've done it in the past. I'm not saying it's a terrible idea, but there's a lot of science, engineering stuff that goes into this, and Will is like the master. This is like his personal goal in life, is to create the best ported head on planet Earth. The dude is into it. So anyway, I think he should tell you a little bit about what goes into a proper port job and why this huge difference is possible.
So when we created the port job for this head that went on the Shorty, I first started with a baseline, and I immediately went over to the valve seat and guide machine, and I worked on the valve job. A good valve job is probably 50% of making a ported head flow more. You need a good valve job that gives you good flow numbers throughout the lift range of the valve. Peak flow numbers are great. They're great for advertising, but at the end of the day, if we can get more area under the curve, more flow throughout the valve's lift range, I can have a lower peak flowing port that knocks the socks off of somebody's peaky, lazy port. Right? Second most important is swirl. Why do we need swirl on a diesel? The fuel is direct injected. It's not added in the intake port on a diesel. So all of that mixing action needs to happen in the cylinder. One of the reasons a new common rail diesel makes more power at the same amount of fuel as a 12 valve is it gets better air fuel mixture. It gets better atomization, which gets better mixture. But even new diesels, they need swirl. The more we can swirl, the better it will spool up. On an older head, it will reduce idle haze. On a newer head, it spools better and it's more efficient. So we need swirl. If you ever notice the new gas engines coming out that are direct injection, they're adding a lot of swirl on their port design. They're all about swirl. So we need swirl. So I have a swirl meter on the bench. We measure it. I measure the baseline and I increase swirl. In fact, we modify the valve job a little bit to increase the swirl at low valve lifts to really get that air swirling early. So, because you got to remember, you inject the fuel early in the stroke. The piston's still on the way up when we start ejecting fuel. The valve's not wide open. So we tremendously need high swirl at low lift. That's what we focused on these ported heads. So swirl, a good valve job. The third most important thing is airflow. We need airflow in and out of the cylinder head. We work really hard on the exhaust side to get that exhaust out. All the exhaust energy that's trapped in the head is not exhaust energy that's hitting your turbine wheel hot to get those turbo spool. So if you want a fast spooling diesel, which I do, we work on the exhaust side. That gets the turbos going in a hurry. And then we need the airflow on top to help reduce the EGTs. If we can get more air in and out of the cylinder head, basically in and out of the cylinders, we can make more horsepower at a lower exhaust temperature and add efficiency. Reduce the pumping losses on the engine. That's where you're going to pick up the small fuel economy gains of the ported head, the efficiency gains, and you can see it on this test we did with Myers truck. The more efficient head that moves more, some of them didn't add a lot of peak horsepower, but they carried it way better to higher RPM, meaning the cylinder head and the engine combination as a whole is more efficient.
All right, thanks, Will. Back to the graph. Now, I have pulled up another graph in addition to the horsepower graph. This is a time graph, because I want to show you guys how much faster things happen when you have more power. Everything's better. First off, let's look at 1,000 horsepower. How long does it take this vehicle to get to 1,000 horsepower? With the stock head, we are at 5.65 seconds, which is right here. So the stock head, kind of see this? These blue numbers over here are seconds of the run. So we come over here, 2,000 horsepower, we are at 5.65 seconds. If we go here, which is where the port head hit 1,000 horsepower, we are at basically 5 seconds. So we're talking 0.65 seconds on a roll-on to 1,000 horsepower quicker. That's just massive. I mean, I'm staring at this horsepower graph, just my mind is blown. Like, think about how long it's over 1,000 horsepower. Same truck, same fuel, same tune, same turbo, only difference is the head. The stock turbo was back to 1,000 horsepower right here about 7 seconds. The new head carried 1,000 way out here to 10.5 seconds. Is that right? Yeah, 10.6 seconds. That's huge. We're talking like 3.5 seconds longer over 1,000 horsepower. And out here we have 170 horsepower jump, 1,000 to 827. We're talking 175 horsepower at that. So we're at 1,000 horsepower with the ported head, 175 horsepower less with the non-ported head. The way this head carries is just insane. Anyway, let's look at some more data. We got more data here. Let's pull up some more stuff. Get rid of this time here, and let's pull in some EGT. I want to look at EGT. This is interesting. Look at how the dash line is the ported head, solid line is the stock head. So we're basically the same power here, actually a little bit more power with the ported head, but our EGT is considerably cooler down here at 250 horsepower. Again, this is like 2,300 RPM, very low RPM for this turbo. And the difference here is 80 degrees difference. And it kind of holds that delta the whole way through. Look at these dashed red, solid red. You have pretty much the same difference all the way through the run until the end. This is very interesting. Remember how we were talking about that EGT nosing over on the stock head and it never did on the ported head? Getting that heat out, getting that air out allows more air in, so we're running leaner. I wish I had an AFR gauge on this so you could see the fuel ratios. I guarantee you right here we are a fair bit leaner with the ported head than we are with the stock head because there's more heat. So when you flood an engine, yes, it does cool it off, but it also kills power, which is why this one is still making power up here, and this one is just nosediving because it's getting very rich. You just can't get the air in and the exhaust out. So that's very interesting. Let's pull up some boost and drive. All right, I've got the boost and drive numbers on the graph. So blue is boost, orange is drive pressure. Remember, the solid lines are the stock head and the dashed lines are the ported head. Early in the run, you can see that the ported head is ahead everywhere. It's making more boost and it's making more drive. Actually, if you watch the drive pressure, the ported head makes more drive always, from beginning all the way to the end, is making more drive pressure than the stock head did. Boost, on the other hand, it actually falls behind the stock head as we go up. This is kind of counterintuitive. How do you have less boost, more drive, and make way more power? Usually that seems backwards. You'd want to drop your drive pressure. What's happening here is we have moved the restriction from the cylinder head to the turbocharger. The turbo housing, the turbine wheel, is now the restriction. With the stock head, the drive wasn't there to drive the turbo any harder. It needed every ounce of drive it could get to make the power. That's why the boost to drive ratios were pretty dang close to 1-to-1, very, very nice. In the new head, we have plenty of drive because that porting really lets that drive out. It's getting into the turbocharger. And so now we have all kinds of drive, and we're not making more boost because the head's consuming it, but the drive is up there. So in this scenario, you may pick up even more power. If you're to do like a little external wastegate and dump some of this drive, you might pick up a little power. The stock head, you would not want to dump drive pressure. It was really good. You dump drive, you're going to lose power. And I don't know how much power you'd pick up dumping drive, but I bet you would pick up some, and even have a bigger delta up here as the top end, just pulls apart with this drive being lower with a wastegate. That'd be really cool. You could go a bigger turbo as well. Different things you can do, but it is interesting to me how you can drop boost, add drive, and just pick up all kinds of power. This shows you what the head can do as a restriction or as a free flowing. It makes a huge difference in how your system works, how your turbo works, how your truck drives and feels. This whole truck here, I'm gonna look at a number. Look here to my left. You see these numbers here, right here. This horsepower. This is the average horsepower across the entire run. So the old head had a 740 horsepower. I'm talking beginning to end, where this one has 807 horsepower beginning to end. So that's a 67 horsepower delta across the whole thing. Obviously, this is less than 67, this is more than 67, averages out to 67 across the whole entire head. That's massive, that's huge. That's a turbo jump, that's injector sizes. I mean, this is just a massive improvement. Your turbo multiplies whatever it has. So if you had compounds, you're adding a bigger multiplier. You'll see even bigger differences because turbochargers are simply multipliers. They multiply the air, they multiply the engine. So with a better flowing engine, you've multiplied it, and you can see here it's just way better. So kind of final thoughts. Meyer, you've had this truck now about 2 weeks, give or take. Been driving on the street.
Yep.
This is the day we went over, just barely in the video. What are your thoughts on the head? Do you like it? Worthy mod? What do you think?
So looking at the data, it's like pretty undisputable that it makes more power, it spools better, whatever. When you're on the street, you 100% notice it. I mean, it really just backs up what we're seeing here. Like, it spools faster. It even, like, what I didn't expect from a stop sign, it seems like it just like it's peppier, it comes up easier. It also, like, I'm able to spool the charger cleaner, which I'm a big fan of, and it just absolutely pulls way harder. Like, when you're like, whether you're doing a burnout, like, it doesn't bog when you grab overdrive, like, it does really good.
Awesome. This been, and up top, it's just screaming. Like, it just,
oh yeah,
big time.
You notice, for sure.
Okay. All right. We got a couple surprises we promised to begin this video. Surprise number one. First off, this dyno, a lot of times people talk about dyno numbers. Do you think this number is repeatable on a different dyno maybe?
Well, you should ask. So we did all this testing on a Friday. The next Saturday, the next day, was the Diesels in the Mountains dyno event up there in Richfield. And I brought the truck. I didn't make any like tune changes, no changes at all. Same turbo, same everything. I literally drove it off the dyno, drove it home onto a trailer, and took it to Richfield, and it put down 1,232 horsepower. So I would say the numbers we had here are fairly back upable on like the UCC dyno that was there. Very reputable dyno. That's where all the records are being made. Like, they were solid numbers.
So this competed in the large single turbo class. And did you win the day?
Not trying to flex, so like kind of won by like 200 horse or so. Like, it did okay.
It did okay. Yeah, so you won the trophy, but you were thrilled because that little, like, we didn't build that turbo to be a monster. We just wanted a good towing turbo.
Does good.
It's doing really, really well. I'm really happy with that turbo.
It does good.
So 1,232 horsepower, put 200 horsepower give or take on the second place.
Yeah.
And just, it's freaking awesome.
Yep.
So surprise number two is, a lot of guys don't run 480s on the street. Gotta be kind of crazy or really like power. So how is this thing gonna do with smaller turbos? We're gonna do some testing on a 476 and a 467.
Yep. We got all the runs before the head got swapped that happened. Now we're gonna go back. We're gonna swap those turbos back on there, do back-to-back runs, and see how it changed it.
Yeah, does it make a big difference with the big turbo? Does it still work with the smaller stuff? I don't know. We're going to find out. So make sure to stay tuned for that video. If you're running a 467 or 476, you're going to want to see this. And if you have any kind of good turbo on your truck, a port head should be in your future.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks. We'll see you next time.